Attention ministry leaders. Have you ever considered growing your ministry with television? Well, the Daily Gospel Network could be what you've been looking for. As one of the nation's largest Christian broadcasting companies, the Daily Gospel Network broadcasts all over the world on popular streaming platforms like Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. If you're looking to grow and reach more people, the Daily Gospel Network could be your solution.
Looking for inspiration, motivation, and the good news of Jesus Christ? Look no further. The Daily Gospel Network has what you need. With more than 300 ministries from all over the country broadcasting every week, you're sure to get your dose of spirit-filled encouragement from the great programs on the Daily Gospel Network. Catch the Daily Gospel Network on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, all mobile devices, and the internet.
Made, confidence be displayed, success is unavoidable, desires will be attained, and you are capable. Can't no one stop your hustle, you're resilient and brilliant, your blessings have no ceiling, you shine and keep grinding. This spiritual remedy is divine and designed for your heart to align with your mind, a prophet for the queendom's hotline, a vision. Fearfully and wonderfully made, confidence be displayed, successes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Welcome back. We have some very exciting information for you today. Today, we are joined by Sonia Gomez Mayren. She is a bachelor's in health and human services. She also has a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. She has some great information she's going to share with us. She's trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. She prepares and enriches premarital counseling, early childhood development, and other trauma and energy psychology modalities. In addition to offering therapeutic services, she does actively participate in community outreach by leading workshops and training programs to promote mental health awareness in the Latino community and other underserved populations. Sonia, welcome today. Thank you for joining us. Listen, this podcast, we say it's by women for women. And so we are so thankful that you had an opportunity to be able to join us today and sharing with us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So guys, today we're talking about living unhealed. And this topic came about just because, as we all know, with good girlfriends, we all talk about all the things that we go through. Everybody in life is going through something. Everybody got an issue. And so we were talking about what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, like how you show up to people, how you show up in your relationships with your friends, your partners, your loved ones. And so we all know that on some level, we're living unhealed. Example from me, it wasn't until I was an adult that I understood that, my mom perhaps did the very best she could with what she had because she was also living with trauma. And so the cycle continues. But so we're going to get some really great tips from Miss Sonia. She's going to share with us, what that looks like and then how we can move past that to better ourselves, better our family, make ourselves whole. And Sonia, before I jump right into my questions, because I'm the only one talking, I know I can do that. It happen. Did you want to start off saying anything before I just jump right into our questions? I don't want to grill you.
Well, I have so much information that when I get started, it's hard for me to stop. So to be able to narrow it down, because the mental health field can be so broad and there's so many areas. You can just go on and on. I will just let you guide me and, you can ask the questions and I will answer.
Absolutely. And Crystal, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. You know how we roll. So perfect. So my first question, thank you for, accommodating. I really appreciate it. My first question to you, in your experience, like, what does it look like when someone is living unhealed? Like, how might that show up in their relationships, their daily behaviors, even or especially within families, like what does that look like for people who are living unhealed?
Okay. Well, first, I want to say that it looks so different for so many different people, right? Everyone will carry their trauma in a different way. But there are
Mhm.
two aspects that you do have to pay attention. One is the cognitive part and then the physical. When I have someone come into my therapy room, the first
Mhm.
thing that I notice is how are they carrying themselves, right?
Mhm.
I can
Mhm.
tell when someone is suffering from anxiety. I can sometimes even tell when they have PTSD before they've even told me, because I do specialize in trauma, so I see this often, especially when it comes to children. It can look
Right.
like someone who has ADHD. It can look like someone who just can't, settle down, can't get a hold of themselves, and they're just all over the place. Once their nervous system has been activated, you see it a lot in the body. So it's two aspects that you look at. The
Yeah.
cognitive part, how do they think? How do they see things? How are they interpreting their world? And the other part is, how is their body being managed? How
Yeah.
are they to sit still? Are they not? Sometimes it can look like someone that is completely shut down and regress. That's another side of trauma as well. But
Yeah.
it does look different for many people. It,
Yeah.
it just varies so much. It can show up in your relationship, in how you handle communication with your partner,
Mhm.
even in the bedroom. If the person has had unresolved sexual trauma, that can interfere in their inability to connect, or women might have pain while having intercourse, and
Yeah.
it could be triggers that they subconsciously hold when, depending on whatever it is, a trauma that they experience. For example, I've had patients that a smell or a
Mhm.
color or a
Mm.
certain touch from their partner can
Yeah.
remind them of the person that abused them, and their whole body will shut down, so that
Ooh.
have people that completely disconnect.
Yeah.
They can experience the act of having sex or having intercourse, but they will disconnect, and that is a lot of a disassociation that is
Yeah.
very common with people who have had sexual abuse, that their mind goes somewhere else,
Yeah.
especially if it's in an instance where it's been prolonged, where it's like over and over, where it's,
Mhm.
an adult or a parent or an uncle, and they've experienced sexual abuse for a long period of time. In order for them to be able to survive this, their mind disconnects. So you see a lot of disassociation. It can show up
Yeah.
in so many different ways.
Right.
However, it is not considered a diagnosable
Mm.
incident or symptoms until it actually interferes in one area of your life.
Yeah.
Because you everyone lives their life in a different way,
Mhm.
and not unless you're already getting in trouble at work, or it's really taking a toll on your relationship, or it's school for children. So once it starts interfering in your day-to-day activities, which that threshold may be different for everybody, that's usually when someone will seek therapeutic services, and that's usually when it becomes a diagnosable symptom.
Yeah. I think I've had the benefit of, turn this down, it's vibrating back to me, but I've had the benefits of your wisdom when we, discussing disconnecting in my relationship with intimacy, just because of the things that I have experienced, like from childhood.
Mhm.
And the flip side of that is also the certain neglectful situations that I have had as a child, like not being raised in a male dominated household. And so naturally, I shouldn't say naturally, because some people are able to overcome it, but you start seeking relationships that don't really serve you, but they serve a instant purpose or gratification, or make you feel wanted or desired, but it's not necessarily good for you.
Well, and that
um
can also be several layers of that traumatic experience that you're talking
yeah.
about. If you're
Yeah.
talking about specifically sexuality, when there is an instance of abuse, it could
Hmm.
come out in two ways. It could be a person that completely shuts down from having sexual experiences in the future, or it could be
Hmm.
someone who is trying to dominate the fear that they felt. See, sexual
That's
abuse is
true.
not about sexual desire, it is about
That's
controlling
right.
somebody else's body and having that control over their body. So, people who become, let's say, promiscuous because of a sexual, a trauma, sexual abuse trauma, are people that are really trying to relive their trauma to feel that they're dominating it, to feel like they're getting ahead, to feel like they're in control. Once a person becomes an adult and has this kind of type of character, it is not seen. People usually don't say, well, something happened to them. That's maybe they have some kind of trauma, but it's seen as a character flaw. In therapy, if there is a child who has experienced sexual abuse, we try and get that feeling of domination over the experience through play therapy. They can repeat it in play therapy in a safe environment where a therapist can guide them and help them over and over so that their nervous system will say, okay, this is out of my body and I don't feel like I have to replicate it. Because another way that it can show up is that they can be perpetrators to somebody else to feel the domination of that fear that was initiated with the trauma. Okay. So that's why it is important, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. Usually when someone is a perpetrator, they more than likely are victims of sexual abuse, and
True.
it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. If you are living in a cultural dynamic where there's intergenerational trauma, where it has been seen and shown to children that you know, if a woman doesn't want to be with you, you take them, you take what you want, and I see that also culturally, that it's not only physical or they've seen someone, so they don't necessarily have to be the victim of a sexual contact trauma, but it's still considered sexual trauma when you have been exposed to unhealthy sexual behaviors.
I can see that. Let me ask you this. Can you share how unhealed emotional wounds might play out in a marriage, for example, in the form of how there's communication breakdowns, unmet expectations, recurring conflicts like people in marriages having the same argument over and over? Like, what patterns do you see? And is there a something we can do to kind of break that cycle? And
what you can do to break that cycle, it's something that's pretty individual. I mean, everyone's story is different. So getting to a therapist, getting more information about yourself and how your connection with your primary caregiver is very important indication. I would start off with learning what your attachment style is. Your attachment style says a lot about how you're going to handle relationships in the future, not only romantic relationships, but also with friends. So there is an unorganized attachment style. There is an avoidant attachment style. There is an anxious attachment style, and then there's a normal attachment style. And the most common are the avoidant and the anxious, So learning about those attachment styles, and they are developed in your early childhood, depending on what your relationship was with your primary caregiver. So this will show up a lot in relationships. That's one. Another, I would say, belief that a lot of couples struggle with is he or she does not make me happy. He or she does not do what I need them to do to make me happy. One of the first things that I tell couples, it is your happiness is your responsibility.
That's right.
Not the other person's. So, those are expectations that you're going to put on the other person that are not realistic. It is, if you understand and you know what it is that you need, if you get to know yourself first and you know what makes you happy and you know what you need, then you can either communicate that to your partner, and that's your responsibility because you're communicating to them what your desires are, or you can also look for a partner that will fulfill those desires. Where there is confusion is that if as a child you had unmet emotional needs, whether it was from mom or from dad, you will look for that in a partner. You will look for what your mother didn't provide for you. I mean, you're reliving this trauma over and over, but then you don't see it. You can't see, it is not like, for example, if there's something going on between a couple, sometimes we have to reflect and say, this is not my mom, this is my husband. And maybe the unfulfilled emotional need that I have needs to come from somewhere else. It's not my husband's responsibility. So just making that distinction is the beginning of a process to being able to heal that relationship.
Yeah. Girl, we might need a one-on-one with that. Because baby, I'm trying to tell you, you said a mouthful right there that had me going, yeah, I can see myself. I can see myself in that. Yeah. Did you have any questions, Crystal, before I move on to my next question? Because this is getting good to me. Okay. Thank you. So the next question that I wanted to ask you, I know in your practice, you do see a lot of children who are impacted at a young age by trauma or devastation within the family unit. What are some of the things that outsiders might look for, like myself, might look for in a child or a person in order to be able to be supportive to what they may be going through, and they don't even realize that they need assistance? You know what I mean?
Well, that's such a touchy situation, because when you're talking about children and you recognize that something is going on. Now, remember, that is your perception, right? So we can think something is wrong based on our experience, but do we really know something is wrong based on what that family is living? Well,
that's true.
You know, most of the time, you know, if you see a child, you can tell something's going on. Like, say, for a child that's overly needy, a child that doesn't know how to set boundaries, like they latch onto you, they hug you, you know, they're very affectionate when you're like, oh, hold on, you know, you should have a little bit of a stranger danger here, you know, this is too much, too fast, too soon, right? So there you kind of like, okay, well, there's something going on. Maybe there are some emotionally unmet needs there, right? And a child that looks like they're just bouncing off the walls, the most misdiagnosed illness for children, or I don't know if you know, it's ADHD. A lot of times a child will go into their primary care doctor and they get diagnosed with ADHD when it's really trauma, when it really is PTSD. So it looks very similar. And if you are concerned about the child, you know, also recognize what are your limitations in regards to your ability to be able to truly help the family. If you can recognize or identify that there is a need and it is confirmed, the best thing is to find professional help. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist. It could be, you know, someone at church. It could be a counselor at school. But recognizing, like, you know what? I recognize there's a need. I will be supportive, but also it is not my job. Now, I'm not talking about pulling back and saying, I don't care and I'm being selfish. I'm talking about being able to give the person the adequate care that they need. And also being able to take care of yourself. So, you know, if you have someone that comes to you and they have a gash on their leg, you know that they need to get to the hospital. So you take them to the hospital. You don't give them, you know, you don't do the stitches, because I wouldn't know what to do. So it's kind of like the same concept. We look at mental health as being something completely different than how you triage someone when you go into the emergency room, but there are a lot of similarities.
I think to jump on that real quick. So for me, my daughters, right, when they were at a young age, between, I don't know, 6 and 5, when I got divorced, I immediately got them a therapist, because they saw things, they heard things, right? Arguments between me and their dad. And their dad is actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1 with psychotic features and severe manic episodes, right? Which then escalated to schizophrenic, right? So that's the whole point of him and I getting divorced. So at one point I felt like my children at that age needed therapy, and I did seek help for them, you know, because my oldest, she couldn't stand hearing arguments. So she would do this, right? And it's like, stop, you know, and she would get anxious, you know, and at that point I was like, okay, that's not normal. So I did seek, you know, therapy for both, mainly for my oldest, because my younger one, she was still like 5, you know. The therapist would tell them, you know, draw out your feelings, or how do you feel, you know, with this, and then they would draw it out. You know, and they did therapy for like a year, and you know, the therapist did teach us like coping mechanisms, and you know, show them that, you know, it's okay, right? to feel a certain way, but also to communicate, even if it's just by drawing, you know. And I'm glad that I did that at that time, because now it's, you know, it's night and day. It's like, they got
so
to
early
feel,
intervention is
they got
really
to
important.
learn. Yeah.
And Crystal, you are their parents. You know better than anyone. So even when I have a family that I'm just meeting, I am curious. I'm like, Mom, Dad, you need to tell me. I can look at this, I can look at that, but I have to corroborate that it's really what I'm seeing. It's true, right? Because you said, I noticed that this wasn't normal for my child. Having parents involved in the therapeutic process for children is absolutely essential. You have to have that. There's a misconception with some parents, especially when it comes to children that might be a little non-compliant and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. It's like, okay, I drop them off at the therapist's office and they're going to get fixed. That is not going to happen. A child does not, you know, I tell parents, children don't raise themselves. They're a product of their environment. So in order for them to truly heal, they have to be involved in the therapeutic process because their environment has to change. I have flat out told parents that are like, well, you know, maybe 2 times a week. Maybe I'm like, you know what? You can have your child here every single day with me. But if you don't stop degrading that child, if you don't stop putting your hands on that child, if you don't stop fighting with your spouse in front of that child, nothing is going to ever change.
You know what that makes me think about, Crystal? The conversation that you and I had about, as a parent, where you can choose to be a woman or be a parent. And in this situation, you're like, I'm choosing whatever this is over being a parent. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though it's not helping my child, this is a safe space for me to demean this child. This makes me feel empowered, like they're choosing their own, self-serving ways over their child, which is crazy.
But let me add something to that, because I do see a lot of women who end up either getting divorced or they find themselves that they're empty nesters and they cannot find their identity. One of the greatest, the biggest things that happen with women is that we lose our identity. You have a right to be a woman. Even if you're a single parent, you just have to set up certain boundaries. I am a woman here and I'm a mother here, you know, and even I've talked to families in regards to that. You know, mothers don't, you know, there is this, some people will look down on moms or will judge mothers for being women, for dating, for saying, you know, I have certain needs to feel love. I have certain sexual needs. I mean, let's be realistic. That is life. And there is nothing wrong with that. However, if you know how to set those boundaries and how to meet your child's needs and even get help, you know, with resources from family, you know what, babysit for me while I go out, you have every right to be a woman. You don't have to pick one over the other. It's just finding that perfect balance for your family.
That took me a while too, to find like the balance after being divorced. And then once I did, I didn't feel guilty, right? Because then it's like, you can't, you know, the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's like, I needed to fill myself, right? Even if it was a trip with friends, even if it was, you know, self-care as going to the gym, I need that hour, right? And I didn't feel guilty. And I guess my daughter started to see the difference, where it's like, oh, your mood is different. And even when, you know, starting to date as well, it was like, okay, this is okay, right? To introduce love. Then like, to speak what me and Beverly have shared before on like on I guess a previous episode, but it's like, I'm a woman first, because we do get lost in our identities, right? We become wives, moms, chefs, counselors, the carpool mom. We become all these things, and that we forget about ourselves. But when, for me, for example, like if a relationship or something, a situation is messing up my nervous system, right? Or it's like where you have to choose, right, a toxic relationship or something, you know, that is unhealthy versus your children. That's when I'm like, okay, I'm a woman, yes, but then this is when I become a mom first, right? Because at the end of the day, your children, especially, they're so young, right? In my case, if they're older and then it's just like they're living their life, then you know what? No, I'm going to go on a trip with this, you know, my partner or someone that I've met, I'm going to live life. But when they're still young, I feel like they still need you, right? You do set an example, right? At home of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. You know, as like, you know, like if you have a partner that is toxic and is not, is arguing, always upset, the kids, children hear conversations, like they, my daughter at one point was like, I just don't like how he talks to you. And she was okay to say that. And at that point you have to reevaluate, like, oh, they're not little, like little, they understand, and then at that point you have to take, what their thoughts, their feelings, their concerns, right? And be like, okay, this is where it's like, yeah, I'm a woman, but I'm also a mom and they're still under my care and I have to do what's best for them, but also what's best for me, and be able to be like, this is not okay for me to continue to allow, because then that's also trauma, that's patterns that they're seeing where it's like, well, mom went through it and it's okay, right? Like, right. I'm sure you've had patients where it's like, well, my mom always, my mom got beat by my dad, and now I'm getting beat by this man, and it's not okay.
Yeah. Well, that's, that's intergenerational trauma and learned behaviors, right? Now, what I wanted to add to what you were saying, Crystal, is I tell many women that find themselves in the situation where they're getting divorced, they're going to go back into the dating game after how many years? I mean, they're going to have, some slip ups. It's going to be a hit and miss when they're meeting people. And what I advise them is keep it away from your kids. Not until you know that you are in a good, healthy relationship. Do not expose your children to this. You're not.
That's the best advice right there.
You're not going to be perfect. It's not the first guy that you're going to meet. It's like, okay, this is another Prince Charming. It's not realistic. It's not going to happen. And you are allowed to make those mistakes. That's right. But do not.
Sonia, where were you a year ago? I needed this.
I was here in Minneapolis.
So in the interest of time, I'm just going to pose this last question to you, Sonia. You've given us all some really valuable information. I'm just like, I feel like I have so many more questions that I want to ask. But so my last question is, for people who are not ready for therapy yet, what is some baby steps or powerful steps that you can give to someone to begin the healing process, so you don't have to keep living unhealed? Like, what can we do for ourselves when we're not ready to go into therapy?
Okay. One of the first things that I want to mention, like I said in the beginning, having healing yourself in a therapeutic process consists of two things, which is the cognitive brain and also your body. If you see that you have more anxiety, panic attacks, things like that, you have an overactive nervous system, deep breathing. I know that you hear it all the time everywhere, but if you go onto YouTube, you can find certain videos that show you how to really do box breathing, and that will calm a panic attack and your nervous system a lot faster than any medication that you can be given. The medication that you're given for, immediate or that you need immediate relief can take up to 30 minutes. If you do a good series of 3 to 4 box breathing cycles, that can calm down your panic attack, and there's no need for medication. So you can try that, but you have to practice. You got to practice when you're not having a panic attack, so that you can do it when you are having a panic attack. And you can practice
box breathing.
Box breathing, yes.
Okay.
And then
looking for inspiration, motivation, and the good news of Jesus Christ.
So that's one thing.
Look no further. The Daily Gospel Network has what you need. With more than 300 ministries from all over the country broadcasting every week, you're sure to get your dose of spirit-filled encouragement from the great programs on the Daily Gospel Network. Catch the Daily Gospel Network on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, all mobile devices, and the internet.
You just can't get past a person that just really, has...
Attention ministry leaders. Have you ever considered growing your ministry with television? Well, the Daily Gospel Network could be what you've been looking for. As one of the nation's largest Christian broadcasting companies, the Daily Gospel Network broadcasts all over the world on popular streaming platforms like Roku, Amazon Fire.
I think I need a burn session.
Listen, I've done that and it works, Sonia. That's how I'm like, not the box breathing, but the journaling, the writing, burning it up, and just letting it go.
Yeah, and be very reflective, be very intentional. You know what? With this, watch the ashes fly away. I just release it. I let it go. It's no longer a part of me. So it doesn't stay stuck in your body.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, we just got a mouthful.
my heart is full.
I know. I'm just like, I feel like I'm going to tell you. Yes, like I really
need to come back. She needs to
come back. I know we need to have a mental health month and just like have her come back on here, because like my eyes are tearing because every time I talk to Sonia, I go away feeling so much more powerful, and I'm so thankful for that. It feels so good. So, guys, as we like to leave you guys with like a nice, good affirmation before we go. And then on this one, since we're talking about mental health, and she just mentioned journaling, I want you to think about this. In what ways have you learned to function while still carrying unhealed wounds? I know I put on a face and I could be hurting inside, so I know it's not just me. And then ask yourself, what would that look like to finally stop performing strength and start honoring your pain and then getting past it? I think that's an important thing to do. We got to figure this out, guys. We're going to get better. I sure appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you, every time you log on. Please continue to like, share, subscribe. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and we look forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thanks, Sonia.
You're welcome.